"You don't belong in this family," my uncle said after I spoke up. Everyone avoided eye contact. So I took out the photo and told them the real story of what he did in 1997. "My name is Ethan. I'm 29, and up until last Thanksgiving, I thought the worst thing about my family was how good they were at pretending. But that changed the moment my Uncle Rick pointed his fork at me and said, loudly enough to cut through every conversation at the table, 'You don't belong in this family.' He said it like a joke, but it wasn't. His voice didn't crack. His eyes didn't shift. He meant it. And the worst part? No one stood up for me. Not my mother, who was slicing sweet potatoes 2 seats away. Not my grandmother, who had always insisted family sticks together. Not my cousin Paige, who I'd driven 6 hours to pick up from the airport. They all froze. They all just waited, like they were afraid of what I might say back. So I took a breath, reached into the inside pocket of my coat, still hanging on the chair behind me, and pulled out the envelope I had brought just in case this dinner went sideways. And I said, calm as I could, "Rick, if we're doing this, then let's do it properly. Let's talk about what really happened in 1997. That's when everything shifted. Chairs squeaked. Forks dropped. My mom finally looked at me, but it wasn't support in her eyes. It was fear. And Rick? He went pale. He didn't laugh. Didn't say, "What are you talking about?" like a guilty man might. He just whispered, "Don't." I let the envelope drop on the table with a slap. It slid toward him, stopping at the edge of his plate. He didn't touch it, but the moment was already here. The silence had weight now. I could see my grandmother blinking faster, like she suddenly didn't want to be at the head of the table anymore. I had waited 17 years for this moment. 17 years of watching Rick charm his way into every family event. Of him buying his way out of any real consequence. Of him acting like the second father I never asked for after mine died. Of him whispering decisions to my mother behind closed doors when I was a kid, and then smiling at me like nothing had happened. So no, I didn't flinch. Let's rewind. I was 12 when I found the photo. I'd gone up into the attic above my father's old workshop. My mom always told me not to go up there, said it was unsafe, too many nails, dust, insulation. But one day, she was out, and I was bored. So I climbed the wooden steps and started going through the old boxes. Most of it was junk, broken drills, stacks of outdated magazines, a rusted camping lantern that still smelled like propane. But in the far corner, under a tarp, I found a black file box. Inside were envelopes, some yellowed with age. One had my dad's name scribbled on it in thick marker, for Ethan, when he's old enough. I opened it. Inside were 3 things. A faded Polaroid, a folded police report, a paternity test sealed in a plastic sleeve. I didn't understand what I was looking at. Not at first. The Polaroid showed a teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17, sitting on a couch. She looked scared. Her hands were in her lap. And standing behind her, smiling like he was at a birthday party, was Rick, the man who told me to call him Uncle since I was 4. My dad's best friend. The same man who moved into our house 6 months after Dad passed away from a heart attack. I didn't even recognize the girl. There was no date on the back. But something about the way Rick stood behind her, it unsettled me, even as a kid. The police report didn't make much sense back then either. I saw the words minor, allegation, and case closed, but the rest felt like legal gibberish. I tucked it back in. And the test? I couldn't read it. I wasn't old enough to understand DNA markers or legal notations. But one thing stood out. Relationship, excluded, 0% probability of paternity. Years later, I would realize that report wasn't about Rick proving he wasn't the father. It was about him trying to prove that. But the name on the test didn't match the girl in the photo. It was a different case altogether. A failed one. After that day, I started noticing things. The way my mom's voice tightened when Rick entered the room. How she flinched when he touched her shoulder, even gently. How she'd avoid arguments with him like he was the landlord instead of her late husband's friend. I started digging. Quietly. Patiently. Over years. Rick had a sealed court record from 1997. Juvenile involvement. It took me months to figure out who the girl in the photo was. I only found her name because it was written on the back of a birthday card that had been shoved in the bottom of that file box. The girl was 17 when she gave birth. The child was taken by the state. The mother disappeared after a court settlement. And Rick? Rick went on to become a respected lawyer, the self-declared head of the family, and the man who decided I didn't belong. I didn't say anything for years. Not until that dinner. Not until he made it public. He thought he could humiliate me with a single line. Instead, I brought the truth. And the truth was still sitting in that envelope, untouched, in front of his plate. Rick didn't touch the envelope. He sat there with that smug, aging poker face, shoulders tensed, eyes flickering toward the door like he was already looking for an escape. But I wasn't going to let him slip out of this one with a joke and a refill of wine. He'd spoken first. I was just finishing the conversation. Let me take you back again, because what I found after that attic trip went way beyond an old photo and a vague police report. I spent most of high school obsessed with it. Quietly, in the background. While my classmates were dating, doing sports, sneaking off to house parties. I was in the library on dial-up computers, trying to decode a sealed case from 1997 that involved my uncle, a missing girl, and a baby no one wanted to claim. The girl's name was Valerie Marsh. She was a foster kid from the outskirts of Dayton, Ohio. The only reason I eventually found her was because of a scribbled birthday card I found months after that first attic trip, signed to V, from E, stay strong. A. The E stood for Ethan, but the A, I didn't know who that was. The handwriting matched something else I found later. A postcard, mailed from a halfway house outside Columbus, dated October 1998. It was addressed to my father, which meant he knew. He'd try to help her. And that's where it started making sense. My father was a quiet man, worked with his hands, never raised his voice. But toward the end of his life, he was stressed, distracted. There were nights I caught him sitting in the dark garage, smoking even though he'd quit. I didn't understand it then. But now I know exactly what he was carrying. Rick had gotten Valerie pregnant in the spring of 1997. She was 17. He was 27. At the time, Rick was coaching a community softball team. Valerie was living with a foster family that had ties to my grandmother's church. That's how they met. And that's how it started. From what I've pieced together, Valerie tried to tell someone. A teacher, maybe a caseworker. But the family she lived with was connected, and Rick had money, charm, and just enough legal know-how to twist it all up. The case went nowhere. Consent was pushed hard. The age difference was downplayed. The family? Silenced. Probably paid. But the baby? That was a complication Rick couldn't charm his way out of. A boy, born January 1998. No official father listed on the birth certificate. Placed into emergency foster care within 2 weeks of delivery. Valerie was encouraged to move states and start over. She did, and then vanished completely. I tried to track her down as an adult. Nothing. No Facebook. No trace. Just a woman erased before she even turned 20. But I found something else. The boy. Or, more accurately, what happened to him. His name was Micah. That's what his first foster mother had called him. I only found that out from a court report buried in county records. He'd bounced between 3 homes before the age of 4. He died in 2002. Complications from pneumonia, the file said. But it also mentioned signs of malnutrition. Inconsistent medical attention. He wasn't abused, exactly, but he was never really wanted, either. No next of kin ever stepped forward. No family member claimed the body. A charity organization paid for his burial. That's when I lost it. Because I knew. Rick had known. The sealed document my dad left behind, it included a letter. Short. Just 2 lines. Rick knew. I tried to stop him. If anything happens to me, tell the truth. It was dated a week before my dad collapsed in our kitchen. They ruled it a heart attack. Maybe it was. But I've always wondered if it wasn't something else. A slow, festering stress that finally broke him from the inside out. Rick didn't just destroy Valerie's life. He didn't just abandon a child he should have taken responsibility for. He buried them. And my family, my so-called family, let him. My mom knew parts of it. Enough to feel guilty. Enough to shut down any time Rick was in the room. And now, sitting at the table next to her brother, she looked like she might throw up. The envelope sat between them like a landmine, full of the proof I had collected. Photos, the letter, court filings, Valerie's last known address, and a copy of Micah's death certificate. It was all there, and I was done waiting. Tell them, I said, staring at Rick. Or I will. Rick didn't say a word. He just stared at the envelope like it was ticking. Like if he stayed perfectly still, it might forget to blow up in his face. My mother shifted in her chair, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for her water. My cousin Paige blinked at me like she didn't understand the language I was speaking. And my grandmother, she kept her eyes on her plate. Her fork hadn't moved in 10 minutes. So I leaned forward, rested my hand gently on the envelope, and said it again. Tell them what you did. Or I will. Rick finally spoke. This is disgusting, he hissed. Trying to ruin Thanksgiving with some fantasy. Is it a fantasy, Rick? I interrupted. Because I brought documents. Timelines. Photos. Death certificates. That's more evidence than Valerie ever got. That name, Valerie, cut through the room like a knife. And Rick's jaw clenched so hard I thought his molars might crack. My mom let out a sound, like a sob swallowed halfway through. You said that name before, Paige said cautiously, frowning. Who is she? I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I stood up and peeled the envelope open. I pulled out the photo. The same one I found when I was 12. Rick. Valerie. Her eyes tired. His hand on her shoulder. I laid it in the center of the table. Then I placed the court filing beside it. Then Micah's short, tragic file. And finally, the sealed letter from my dad, dated 3 days before he died. Rick stayed silent. I looked at every single person at that table. You all wanted to know why I keep my distance. Why I barely show up to family things. Why I never bring a girlfriend around. Why I always seem like the angry one. I tapped the photo gently. This is why. Because while the rest of you were passing around turkey and pretending everything was normal, I was living with this. With him. With the knowledge that Uncle Rick wasn't just arrogant or controlling, he's a coward who abandoned his own child. My grandmother finally looked up. Ethan, that's a very serious accusation. Is it? I said, my voice calm. Because the court in 1997 thought it was serious too. They just didn't have enough money to fight him. Valerie didn't. The foster system didn't. My dad tried. But you all remember how quickly Rick stepped in after he died, right? I turned to my mother. You knew? Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't deny it. She just stared at her lap like a child being scolded in church. I didn't know everything, she whispered. Not until later. But by then, Rick was already helping us. And your father was gone. What did you expect me to do? Anything. I said. Anything except let him play patriarch while his dead son went unclaimed. Paige stood up slowly. What do you mean, dead son? I slid Micah's death certificate across the table toward her. She read the name. Her lips moved as she read the line. No known father. No family contact. Rick finally broke. This is nonsense, he snapped. That boy wasn't mine. The whole thing was a scam. Valerie tried to trap me. Your dad knew that. That's why he kept quiet. But now I saw it. The lie wasn't practiced. His panic was real. He hadn't expected me to know the child's name. He hadn't expected me to have documents. And he definitely hadn't expected me to bring it here. Thanksgiving, with the whole family watching. I talked to the woman who fostered Micah, I said. Her name's Carla. I found her last year. She remembered him. She remembered how scared he was of men. How he never asked about his mother. But he used to cry when cartoons showed happy families. Said he didn't have one. Rick's face turned red. And you know what she told me? I asked. That a man came by once. Dressed nice. Asked questions. Never gave his name. When Carla asked if he was the father, he said, not legally. Then he got in his car and never came back. I leaned in. Was that you, Rick? He didn't answer. But the silence screamed it for him. Then Paige stood up, holding the death certificate like it was burning her hand. She turned to my mom. Did you know he had a child? My mom choked out a response, something like, it wasn't confirmed, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. The illusion of Uncle Rick, the successful one, the golden one, the glue of the family, was crumbling. And underneath? Just a man who spent 3 decades hiding a grave mistake. And a boy who refused to stay quiet about it. I never thought I'd see my mother cry in front of Rick. Not because she was too proud, but because for as long as I could remember, she avoided showing any weakness around him. She kept a tight smile, tense shoulders, always saying he means well, after he made a backhanded comment or bossed her around at family functions. But now she was staring at a death certificate for a 4-year-old boy, and something in her broke. He told me the girl lied, she said, voice cracking. He said it was a rumor, that your father got pulled into something messy, that it was better not to dig. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her, waiting. I was scared, Ethan. We had nothing when your dad died. Rick helped us pay the mortgage. He got you into school. He kept the house from going into foreclosure. He said if I brought up old drama, he'd take it all away. That part one already knew. I had found the bank statements, the property transfer forms. Rick bought our house out from under us after my dad died. Then let us keep living there rent-free. We were tenants of his generosity, not owners of our lives. I'd always wondered why my mother let him make so many decisions for us. Why he got a say in where I went to school, how we spent holiday money, what job she applied for. Now I knew. He'd bought her silence. And she paid for it. Every single year. With guilt she tried to disguise as gratitude. Paige was still standing. Her face had drained of color. She looked like she was about to be sick. My grandmother had finally picked up the photo. She stared at it for a long, long time. Rick spoke again. You think you're some kind of hero, he sneered. Digging through trash from 20 years ago? She's probably not even alive anymore. You think anyone cares? I looked straight at him. She cared. He blinked. Valerie cared. When she gave birth to a baby she didn't know how to protect, she cared. When she wrote my father that letter begging him to help her disappear, she cared. And when your son died in the foster system, unloved, alone, and unclaimed, I guarantee you he cared. Rick tried to stand, but Paige moved first. No, she said sharply, holding a hand up. You sit. You wanted to humiliate Ethan in front of all of us. Well, now you're going to listen. I didn't expect her to take my side. We hadn't been close in years. But watching her stand over him, fierce, shaking with anger, It was the first time in a long time I remembered why I used to look up to her. "Mike is dead," she said, voice low. "And you sat at every family dinner since like nothing ever happened. Like you were some benevolent uncle who bailed everyone out. How do you even live with yourself?" Rick didn't answer. I don't think he could, but I was only getting started. I turned to the rest of them. None of you ever asked why Rick had access to every part of our lives. Why he was the one managing Grandma's care account. Why he co-signed your car, Paige. Why he always knew more than he should have. It's because he kept us under his thumb. He used favors as chains, and we all let him. Paige looked down. My mother buried her face in her hands. "And Grandma?" She finally spoke. "I knew about Valerie." Everything stopped. "I didn't know the whole story," she continued, eyes watering. "But I knew there was a girl. I told your father to stay out of it. I thought he was just making trouble. He was always too soft-hearted for his own good." She paused. "Rick promised me it would go away. That the girl was unstable. That there was no baby." Her voice cracked. I was wrong. Rick stared at her, stunned. She turned to him, voice trembling. "You made me defend you to your brother. And then you let me bury him thinking he'd ruined our name." That's when it hit me. My dad didn't just die stressed. He died isolated. Cut off from the family he tried to protect. And Rick let it happen. He engineered it. My mother was sobbing now. Quietly. Years of guilt unraveling right there in front of the mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce. I looked around the table. At the faces I used to love. And I realized. The truth had already done its job. It didn't fix anything. Didn't bring Valerie back. Didn't rewrite what happened to Micah. But it shattered the illusion. And sometimes, that's the first real step. After the dinner exploded into silence, Rick tried to do what he always did. Slip away quietly before anyone could corner him. But this time I followed him. He grabbed his coat from the foyer, muttering something under his breath. I let him get to the porch before I said his name. He stopped. "Go home, Ethan," he said, not looking back. "You've said enough." "You're wrong," I replied. "I've waited 17 years to say exactly this much." He finally turned. It was dark outside, porch light flickering. His face looked hollow, but his voice still had that cold edge, the one he used in courtrooms and family meetings. The one that said, "I'm still in control." "I could sue you for defamation," he said quietly. "Half of what you said in there isn't even provable." I took a step forward. "Go ahead, but maybe check your inbox before you do." That got his attention. I sent every file, every scanned document, the full folder, and the statement I typed myself, to every person in that room, and to 3 lawyers I know. If something happens to me, if I vanish mysteriously, if I lose my job, if I get hit by a car backing out of a driveway, it all gets published publicly. Police records, Valerie's file, Micah's history. Everything. Rick didn't move. So I went on. "I know you're scared. But you're not scared of me. You're scared because your leverage is slipping. You've been running this family like a private kingdom since I was 5. You thought I was the weak one. The one you could keep quiet." His expression twisted into something between contempt and panic. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said. "I think I'm worse. Because I've been quietly preparing for this since I was a teenager. And you? You've been sloppy." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand the damage you've done." "Oh, I understand exactly," I said. "I know you were hoping the past would stay buried. But the thing about graves, Rick? Sometimes, they don't stay closed forever." He took a breath, like he was about to launch into a defense, but then he just stopped. Like even he didn't believe what he was about to say. "You think this is justice?" he whispered. "You think destroying me will fix anything?" "No," I said. "But it will stop the damage." That's when he snapped. "Fine. You want the truth? Your mother wasn't the only one I helped. Your education? Your job offer after college? I pulled strings. You think you got in on your own? You were a charity case. And you're still wearing the suit I bought you for your first interview." He expected that to land like a punch. But I just looked at him. "I know," I said calmly. "That's why I returned the favor." He blinked. "What the hell does that mean? You remember your law firm? The junior partner you bullied into silence last year? Yeah, he's a friend of mine now. You threatened to end his career. Instead, he gave me access to your firm's HR archive." His face froze. "I found the ethics complaints. The ones that mysteriously never made it to the bar. I made copies. Sent them to the right places. And by Monday morning, your partners will know exactly what kind of man you are, both inside and outside the courtroom." "You're bluffing. Check your email." He pulled out his phone, hands shaking. I stood there and watched. He didn't say anything for a long time. Eventually, he lowered the phone and muttered, "You don't know what you've done." But I did. I had cut the final thread. The illusion of Uncle Rick, the protector, the advisor, the man who kept everyone afloat, was gone. What was left was a desperate man, watching the empire he built on silence collapse. "I'm not trying to ruin your life," I said quietly. "I just want my father to rest. And for the kid you left behind, Micah, to mean something to someone besides me." Then I turned to go. He didn't follow. He just stood there, alone, in the cold. That night, I got a text from Paige. Just one sentence. I believe you. And I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because this wasn't the end. Not until Rick faced everything he spent his life running from. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I got a knock on my apartment door. It wasn't Rick. It was my grandmother. She was holding a cardboard box, barely sealed. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not frail, just stripped of her authority. Like the illusion she'd wrapped herself in for decades had finally peeled away, layer by layer. I think this belongs to you, she said. Inside the box were old photo albums, loose papers, a manila envelope with my name on it, and a cracked wristwatch I hadn't seen since my dad's funeral. I found it behind the dresser, she added, in the room Rick used to stay in when he came around. She didn't stay long. She didn't cry. But before she left, she paused and said, "Your father would have been proud of you. We just didn't listen in time." After she left, I sat on the floor and opened the manila envelope. It was another letter. Same handwriting. Same shaky scrawl I'd last seen on that note in the attic. This one was longer. I'll read you part of it, the part I've memorized now, line for line. Ethan, if you're reading this, it means the truth has been dragged back out. Maybe by me, maybe by you. I don't know how long I can protect you from Rick, but I've kept this quiet for too long. Valerie wasn't just a mistake. She was a casualty of a system that favors wealth and connections. Rick knew exactly what he was doing. He charmed her, then discarded her, then tried to erase her. I couldn't stop it. I tried, but I was just one voice, and Rick had already tightened his grip on this family. I'm writing this not so you'll hate him. I'm writing it so you'll never become him. Truth matters, even if it destroys comfort. And son, even if they say you don't belong, know this. You are the best part of this family. Love always. Dad. I sat with that letter in my lap for a long time. Not crying. Not raging. Just breathing. Letting the dust settle from a storm I'd carried for most of my life. Fallout came quickly. On Monday, Rick's name was quietly removed from his law firm's website. By Thursday, an ethics board launched a preliminary investigation. The third of his career, but the first one with traction behind it. I didn't have to do much. Just gave them what I had, and stepped back. My cousin Paige cut off contact with him entirely. She later told me she started therapy, said she felt like she'd spent years in a house full of smoke, and only just realized she was choking. My mother needed longer. We didn't speak for 2 weeks. Then, one Sunday afternoon, she called. Her voice was tired, like someone who hadn't slept in months. She didn't apologize the way I expected her to. Not with tears or excuses. Just one line. I knew you'd tell the truth someday. I just prayed I wouldn't be part of the reason you had to. We're working on it. Slowly. I don't know if we'll ever fully fix it, but I think that's the point. Some things don't get restored. They get rebuilt from the wreckage. As for Rick, he disappeared. Not literally. He still exists. But he vanished from the family gatherings. From birthdays. From group chats. From Grandma's will. He sent a message once. Short. Cowardly. No apology. Just, you win. Congratulations. But it wasn't about winning. It was about telling the truth while there was still time for someone else to hear it. Last month, I visited Micah's grave. Yes, I found it. It took time, and a couple calls to people who didn't want to talk to me. But I found the little plot outside Dayton. Unmarked stone. No flowers. Just the bare earth and a marker with his name and the years he existed. 1998 to 2002. I brought a toy. A small red car. Left it by the stone. And I said out loud, "You were never a mistake. You were a person. And now people know." That was it. That was enough. Families are strange things. They pretend not to see what's right in front of them. They protect the wrong people for the wrong reasons. They wrap shame in traditions and call it respect. But when someone finally tells the truth, it doesn't always bring people closer. Sometimes, it burns everything down. And if you're lucky, you find the ones willing to rebuild it with you. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.